Now, the new document set out the composite framework for the application of rules with respect to notification and review of mergers under the new Fccpc Act of 2018. Joining me now for an exclusive and first interview on the new framework since it was released last week was Babatunde Irukera, who is the Director General at the agency, Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Council. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director General. We understand it's a Monday and a very busy day, but just kindly summarize the new merger review guidelines, or the MRG 2020, for us.
And so, like you rightly said, it's a pretty composite document. It's almost a portal-to-portal comprehensive approach from pre-notification analysis and even pre-notification contact with the regulator all the way to the end and even post-notification issues. And together with it, you've got the forms, all kinds of forms and templates for how to file a notification. And a significantly large document that accompanies it is the guidelines. So you've got the regulations which have been gazetted, and you've got the guidelines. The guidelines actually is some kind of a snapshot into the thinking of the regulator, a philosophical approach to mergers, and the approach we usually would adopt to considering a merger. I think it's an important document for clarity and for stability and for predictability of the regulatory process. It certainly would assist those who are filing notifications to comply better and faster, to provide all the information that is required in the manner or form that is required, and that would assist the regulator to be more efficient in how we do the work and how quickly we're able to do it.
Why is your agency issuing this framework at this time?
Oh, well, I think it's important. For one thing, the agency is maturing now. If you, like you rightly said, the Fccpc was signed into law in January 2019. 2019 was a pretty active year from electoral and other settling down standpoint for the government. And 2020 has been a quite interesting and active year in a different way, in the form of things slowing down significantly. And so we've been working on this. We've been working with stakeholders, working with lawyers, financial advisors, companies, working globally also with other agencies in Europe, certainly the Federal Trade Commission, the World Bank. And so we're successful in bringing all this work to some close at the end of the year, which is slightly behind what we had hoped for. But it has also helped for us to understand this market more, for us to understand what the other issues could be with the pandemic and failing firms, for us to understand the other issues that could create a competition shock to the market other than the regular market operations. And so I think it's very timely and auspicious, and we're quite confident and excited about what the possibilities are.
But how will the new framework, Mr. Director General, fit into the provisions of the Investments and Securities Act under the SEC's purview?
No conflict at all. As it were, merger review used to be with the Securities and Exchange Commission under the Investment and Securities Act, as you rightly mentioned. But when the National Assembly enacted the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act, it repealed certain provisions of the Investment and Securities Act, which was responsible for merger review. Of course, the Securities and Exchange Commission still retains its prerogative with respect to analyzing the fairness component of mergers when the merger involves a publicly quoted company. And so we work very closely and collaboratively with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And where required, where public entities are part of merger or combination understanding, we usually would allow them to conduct their own fairness test and provide a no objection before we proceed and conclude.
Are there companies looking to do M&A or business combination?
Oh yeah, certainly. Interestingly, the pandemic didn't stop it. As a matter of fact, we had to issue some guidance material about how we would handle merger notifications during the pandemic, including handling them remotely in such a way that parties didn't need to come to the Commission's office. And you must, I mean, so we're seeing foreign to foreign mergers, and we haven't seen domestic mergers. One thing the pandemic created is a lot of stress in the markets, and so we have to be very sensitive and responsive to mergers now, because some firms might be failing, and the sensitivity and dynamism of the regulator may be the difference between success and sometimes failure.
Mr. Director General, stand by with us. We'll be back with you on this conversation when we come back after the break. You're touching on your operations during the COVID-19 2020. We want to hear more from you, where it's hitting the final months tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. Stand by. We'll be right back in 2. Into the newly released merger review guidelines of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Council, as well as the activities of the agency since 2020 started. Director General Babatunde Rukara was touching on that just before the break. Thank you, Mr. Director General. Let's continue this conversation from what you're talking about, the initiatives that we've seen through the Fccpc since 2020 started.
Well, 2020 has actually been an active year. In 2019, we had said that we anticipated that on the consumer protection side, there will be more robust enforcement, because we believe that the first year of the law was sufficient for businesses and operators to familiarize themselves with their obligations under the law. And in that regard, there's been quite some enforcement. Early in the year, there were discriminatory issues with whether certain businesses were allowing Nigerian patrons in, and there was strong enforcement in Lagos, certainly in Abuja also. And during, prior to, just as the lockdowns closed on, stronger enforcement with respect to price gouging. And we're currently prosecuting certain supermarket and pharmaceutical chains for excessive pricing and price gouging. So I'd say that both from an enforcement standpoint and from a judicial process standpoint, there's been quite some work. As we came out of the lockdown, there was strategic enforcement across the board amongst distributors. One of the biggest problems in Nigeria is substandard goods in the retail market and expired goods. And so we knew strategically the fact that there had been a lockdown, there'll be quite a number of goods expiring in the distribution warehouses. And we were correct as we went in and conducted enforcement, so that some key distributors were pushing out goods that would expire shortly after they were distributed. And once those goods get into the retail market, it's very difficult to deal with. And on the competition side, the COVID protocols were significant. And like I said earlier on, spent quite some time developing the merger regulations and the guidance documents, which are just about coming out upstream now. Other than that, we've opened a few investigations, a big one in the flour sector, a big one in pay TV, and there are a few other smaller investigations into issues like abuse of dominant position, post-merger consolidation that seem to increase prices inordinately. And so those investigations are ongoing. And for the rest of the year, we've still got a few things coming. I've got a large global stakeholder engagement with respect to the new regulations and guidance documents to sensitize the public and to also engage the professionals who file the notifications for a seamless transition and operation of the new merger regime. And recently, the Senate confirmed the President's nomination of members of the board and executive management of the Commission. And so with that, we expect that we'll be able to handle a lot more work under our mandate.
Okay, so in terms of the consultations for the new merger review guidelines, what more are you expecting? Is the document complete? Or you think the consultations or the events you have ahead will still form part of the input into this document? Will it necessarily go to the National Assembly? Will it go to Mr. President for approval or signature, whatever? Will it go to FEC?
No, the regulations are concluded, and they've essentially been enacted in accordance with the process under the Fccpc, and they've been gazetted. And there were significant consultations. The first draft we exposed, quite some work before we even got to that final draft. But the first draft we exposed was in July 2019. And between then and the conclusion, we had quite robust input based on the consultation, including from the World Bank, and that was quite helpful. And so what is complete now is the regulations. And there is a guidance document. The guidance document is exactly what it is, it's guidance. And so the feedback we're going to get from the engagement and even other engagement would assist in perhaps modifying, strengthening, or the approach we take under the guidance document.
Interesting. Just give you a minute of what to look out for in 2021 with the Fccpc. Folks seem to enjoy it when they see you on those pictures on social media, getting through stores and things like that. So that got you some very good PR, by the way. So would we see more of that in 2021?
Thank you. Certainly there will be a lot more enforcement in 2021. Might not be me, but certainly the institution. There continues to be a lot of abuse, and things have improved, but it's almost like digging from very deep below the ground. So we still need to hold companies more accountable to what is fair and to consumers. And then from the commerce and the competition side, my market forecast is that there'll be a lot more business combinations and mergers and acquisition. And then from the other competition areas, like monopolies and abuse of dominant power or cartel or restrictive understandings, there'll certainly be a lot more work. And some of the internal training we're doing right now is training on how to investigate and build cases when there are violations of the law. And so I expect that our operatives would certainly be out there a lot more and would be taking closer looks and scrutinizing things a lot more.
Very interesting. Sounds very interesting. Thank you so much, Director General, Fccpc, Babatunde Irukara. We appreciate your time with us this evening. Thank you and have a great evening.